For 3 years, I was the man who married into the Rhodes family, a fact that made me the city's most famous freeloader. I didn't care that I was the butt of every joke, the target of every sneer. It was all part of the deal. I'd even drafted the divorce papers myself, ready for the day her legendary childhood sweetheart returned from his triumphant climb up the corporate ladder. Then, I could walk away with a hefty severance and disappear. Finally, at her birthday gala, he arrived. He shoved a check in my face and pointed a finger at my nose. You think a pathetic lapdog like you is worthy of my Stella? I was about to play my part and get on my knees when my billionaire wife, the CEO of Rhodes Corp., snatched a bottle from the top of the champagne tower and smashed it over his head. As champagne and blood streamed down his face, she stepped over the shattered glass, hooked my chin with her blood-stained fingers, and her voice, a paradox of ice and adoration, whispered, "Darling, do you want his hands or his life? You choose." The annual Rhodes Family Gala was in full swing, the crystal chandeliers blinding. Leo Vance sat at the far end of the long dining table, a ghost at the feast, quietly working on his steak. Leo, Robert Rhodes, Stella's uncle, set down his silverware from his seat near the head of the table. He dabbed his greasy mouth with a napkin, his gaze drifting lazily toward Leo. "Don't just sit there stuffing your face. Go see if Maria needs a hand in the kitchen. You're a man, after all. You can't just freeload off our family for 3 years without lifting a finger, can you?" A few stifled snickers echoed around the table. Every eye, mocking, disdainful, fixed on Leo. Leo didn't stop chewing. He calmly swallowed his bite of steak before looking up. His face was a placid mask. He was used to this. He even managed a nod. Of course, Uncle Robert. He put down his fork and knife, pushed back his chair, and actually started to get up. But as he rose, a voice as cool and clear as a mountain spring flowed from the head of the table. "He's with me. Who gave you permission to order him around?" The voice wasn't loud, but it shattered the fragile civility in the dining room. Silence fell, absolute and suffocating. Everyone turned to the speaker, the true power in the Rhodes family, Stella Rhodes. She hadn't even glanced at her uncle. Her fingers tapped lightly on the table, her sharp, almond-shaped eyes, which always held a hint of distance, now resting softly on Leo. Robert's face flushed red, then went pale. He awkwardly raised his wine glass for a gulp and said no more. "Stella, you're so protective of him," cooed Chloe, Stella's younger cousin, her voice dripping with saccharine sarcasm. "Anyone would think you're actually in love." Stella finally lifted her gaze, fixing her cousin with a look so cold it could freeze fire. Chloe's mouth snapped shut. Just then, the grand, carved wooden doors of the ballroom were pushed open from the outside. A man in a bespoke suit, tall and confident, strode in. He held a massive bouquet of rare blue roses, their color like a brilliant night sky. His handsome face wore a perfectly calibrated smile, radiating the easy assurance of a man who owned the world. "Julian's back. It's Julian Chase. He's back from Wall Street." The mood at the table instantly shifted. The sullen atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a buzz of excitement. Family members shot to their feet, their faces plastered with eager smiles, rushing to greet him. Leo, who had just started to stand, was jostled aside, forgotten like a piece of trash. He stood in stark contrast to Julian Chase, who was now the center of Unca universe. Julian moved through the adoring crowd and walked straight to Stella. He presented the celestial blue roses, his eyes deep and devoted. "Stella, I'm back." His voice was warm and magnetic. Then his gaze, full of judgment and contempt, finally landed on Leo, who stood beside her. "We shouldn't have this kind of impurity between us." The contempt in Julian Chase's eyes was almost tangible. He pulled a check from the inner pocket of his suit jacket. With a flick of his wrist, the slip of paper fluttered through the air, landing on Leo's face with the weight of 1,000 insults. $10 million. For you to get the hell out of the Rhodes family and stop dirtying Stella's world. The check slid down Leo's cheek and drifted to the plush carpet at his feet, as worthless as a dead leaf. The entire Rhodes clan stared at Stella, their expressions a mixture of anticipation, schadenfreude, and smug certainty. Stella's younger sister, in particular, couldn't hide the smirk on her face, eager to see how the drama would unfold. 10 million. For a useless, live-in husband, it was a king's ransom, a once-in-a-lifetime jackpot. No one thought for a second he would refuse. Leo kept his head down, his long bangs obscuring his eyes, hiding the flash of icy ridicule within them. He had to see the act through. He'd already written the final scene in his head. He would bend down, with a look of humiliation mixed with a flicker of greed, and his trembling hand would snatch up the check. Then, amidst a chorus of laughter, he would scurry away like a rat. The 3-year charade was finally at its end. He was just about to bend his knees and perform this final act. Crack! The sound wasn't a glass dropping. It was the sickening thud of a bottle meeting a skull. Time seemed to freeze. Everyone's head snapped toward the source of the sound. Stella stood there, holding the neck of the champagne bottle from the very top of the tower. The body of the bottle was shattered. Golden liquid mixed with startling crimson, streaming down Julian Chase's stunned face. Julian's eyes were wide with disbelief. He swayed for a moment before collapsing backward, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. The room was dead silent for a beat, then erupted in a symphony of screams. Stella, her face a blank mask, tossed the broken bottleneck aside. It shattered with another sharp crackle. Wearing 4-inch stilettos, she walked, step by steady step, across the minefield of broken glass toward Leo, who stood frozen in place. The crunch of her heels on the glass was a percussive rhythm, each step landing on the frantic hearts of the onlookers. She stopped in front of him. Her slender fingers, still flecked with another man's blood, gently lifted Leo's chin, forcing him to meet her gaze. Her eyes were as cold as a frozen lake, but her voice held a terrifying devotion. "Darling, his hands or his life. You choose." Leo looked up and fell into the bottomless depths of her eyes. There was no trace of a joke in them, only pure, unchallengeable dominance. This woman, for him, her supposedly useless husband, had just cracked open her childhood sweetheart's head in front of the city's elite. A wave of heat, something he hadn't felt in years, crashed against the walls of his frozen heart, and for a split second, he was lost. For the first time, he didn't want to act anymore. Leo reached out and gently took her hand, the one that was still trembling slightly, the one stained with blood. He carefully uncurled her fingers and enveloped them in his own palm. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent ballroom. "Don't dirty your hands." He paused, then pulled her hand and turned to leave. "Let's go home." Under the shocked, horrified, and utterly bewildered stares of everyone present, Leo led Stella Rhodes out of the grand ballroom. He didn't look back, sealing the chaos and astonishment behind the heavy doors. Back at the mansion, the heavy, carved wooden door shut out the rest of the world. Stella tossed her car keys onto the console table in the foyer with a sharp clatter. She shrugged off her blood-stained evening jacket, revealing arms still dotted with flecks of champagne, her entire being radiating a formidable, keep-your-distance aura. She walked quickly to Leo. Her eyes, the same eyes that could make business rivals tremble, were now scanning him up and down, a flicker of panic in them that even she didn't recognize. "Come here. Sit." Her voice was still cool, but it wasn't a command. It was a clumsy attempt at care. Leo obediently sat on the sofa, watching her turn to get the first aid kit. This woman, a queen one moment, smashing champagne towers and treading on broken glass, was now flustered over a tiny scratch on his face. Stella opened the kit and took out a cotton swab and antiseptic. Her fingers, long and elegant, were unsteady. "This might sting a little. Try to bear it," she murmured, leaning in to carefully clean the red mark on his cheek where the edge of the check had scraped him. The cool sting of the antiseptic was nothing compared to the searing heat from her fingertips. Leo sat perfectly still, letting her tend to him. For 3 years, he had perfected the mask of a pliant, useless man. But never, not once, had his heart been gripped and gently squeezed by a warm hand like this. "I'm sorry," Stella said, her voice soft with regret. "You were humiliated tonight because of me." Leo looked up, meeting her gaze, which was filled with genuine pain and apology. He had seen countless pairs of eyes filled with awe, fear, greed, but never a pair that was purely, simply angry on his behalf. "I'm fine," he said, his voice a little hoarse. Stella's hand paused. She felt the need to explain. "Julian, I knew him before I went to college. That's all. 3 years ago, my family tried everything to force me into a business marriage. I needed a shield." She looked at Leo, her expression frank. "Instead of finding some ambitious wolf, I decided to find the safest option." The safest option. Leo chewed on those words internally, almost laughing out loud. Him, Hades, the phantom of the underworld, decisive and deadly, a harbinger of doom to countless people, was her choice for the safest, most harmless man. The irony was suffocating, but he didn't expose the truth. He just played along, putting on a look of dawning realization mixed with self-deprecation. "So I was the tool you picked? The one who would cause the least amount of trouble." His phrasing made Stella flinch. Seeing his feigned casualness made her feel even worse. She suddenly dropped the cotton swab and, without warning, threw her arms around him, pulling him into a tight embrace. Leo's body went rigid. The hug held no lust, only a powerful, possessive strength, as if she were staking a claim. Leo, it doesn't matter how he started. Stella buried her face in his shoulder, her voice muffled, but every word clear. Right now, you're Stella Rhodes' husband, and if anyone dares to touch you, I will destroy them. Her warm breath ghosted over his ear, and in that moment, Leo's stiff posture relaxed just a fraction. He slowly raised a hand, hesitated, and finally let it rest on her back. For the first time, an uncontrollable variable had been introduced into his long-planned revenge. Meanwhile, at the city's best private hospital, crash! An expensive porcelain cup was smashed against the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. Julian Chase, his head wrapped in thick gauze, his handsome face twisted in a furious snarl. Stella Rhodes, you bitch, and that worthless piece of trash. I'll make you both pay. 100, 1,000 times over. He gasped for breath, grabbed his phone, and dialed a secure, encrypted number. The call connected. The other end was silent, a dead void waiting for his command. Julian lowered his voice, each word laced with poison. It's me. I want someone to disappear from this world. Permanently. Julian's revenge was swift and brutal. The moment the market opened the next day, Rhodes Corp's stock took a nosedive. A sickening green line plunged downward, a dagger in the hearts of its shareholders. Hostile short sellers swarmed in like sharks that had smelled blood. Panic rippled through the company as negative rumors spread like wildfire. Stella's phone was ringing off the hook. She stood before the floor-to-ceiling window of her office, dressed in a sharp power suit, her face so cold it could turn water to ice. Stabilize the price, at any cost, she commanded the board members on the other end of the line. And I want a trace on that capital. Find out whose accounts it's coming from. Hanging up, she glanced over at Leo, who was sitting on the sofa in her office, quietly watching TV. The frost on her brow melted slightly. I have to go out for a bit. An emergency at the company. She walked over to him, her voice unconsciously softening. Lock the door when you get home. Don't want her off? Okay. Leo looked up, his face a mask of perfectly calibrated concern. Darling, is it serious? Don't overwork yourself. It's nothing. Just a little trouble, Stella said, ruffling his hair. I'll be back soon. As he watched Stella's retreating back, the docile expression on Leo's face slowly faded, leaving behind an abyss of calm. He picked up his phone. A new message glowed on the screen. Julian Chase has made his move. Night fell, and the mansion was silent. Suddenly, a faint click came from the front door lock. Several dark figures slipped inside, their movements practiced and silent. The leader, a bald man with a face full of brutish muscle, scanned the luxurious villa with contempt before his eyes landed on the seemingly frail figure on the sofa. Leo acted as if he'd been startled awake. He shot up from his sofa, his face a picture of panic. Who are you? What do you want? The bald man grinned, cracking his knuckles. The sound was like popping firecrackers. Who we are doesn't matter. What matters is that someone paid us a lot of money. For your 2 legs and one of your hands. He advanced slowly, his eyes mocking. The famous Rhodes family freeloader. In your next life, be a little smarter about who you piss off. Leo stumbled backward until his back hit a cold wall, with nowhere left to run. His face was etched with terror, his body trembling. No, don't come any closer. Do you want money? My wife has money. I can give you her credit cards. Ha ha ha. The thugs roared with laughter, their voices dripping with disdain. In their eyes, this man was nothing but a pathetic coward who had already pissed his pants in fear. The bald man raised a steel pipe, aiming it at Leo's knee, and swung down without mercy. You can ask her in your next life. The pipe whistled through the air. Just as it was about to connect with Leo's leg, his eyes, which had been wide with terror, suddenly became as still and dead as a winter lake. He moved, his body twisted at an impossible angle. The pipe scraped past his pant leg and slammed into the wall, striking sparks. The bald man froze, stunned. Before he could react, a hand shot out like lightning and clamped down on his wrist. Crack! A sickening snap of bone. The bald man's scream died in his throat as Leo snatched the steel pipe from his grasp, spun, and in a single, fluid motion, whipped it across the shins of another thug. Another crack of breaking bone. The entire sequence was seamless, impossibly fast. The smiles on the remaining thugs' faces froze, replaced by raw, primal fear. Was this the powerless weakling from the rumors? This was no freeloader. This was a demon. Leo gave them no time to think. He moved through them like a phantom, a graceful dance of destruction. Every strike was met with a pained grunt and the sound of a body hitting the floor. His movements were clean, efficient, targeting the most vulnerable joints and pressure points. In less than 10 seconds, no one was left standing but Leo. He walked over to the bald man, who was now writhing on the floor, clutching his mangled wrist. Leo nudged his face with the toe of his shoe, then slowly crouched down. He deliberately took off the pair of non-prescription glasses he had worn as a disguise for 3 years. Behind the lenses was a pair of eyes that were cold, indifferent, and held the weight of a king surveying his domain. His voice was soft, but it landed on the bald man's soul like a sledgehammer. Go back and tell Julian Chase, who gave him the balls to touch what belongs to Hades. The metallic tang of blood still hung in the air of the mansion. Leo, his face in a motionless mask, dialed an encrypted number. When the call connected, he said only 2 words. Clean up. No other explanation was needed. The person on the other end, clearly accustomed to his terse commands, answered with a respectful affirmative and disconnected. Less than 10 minutes later, several figures slipped into the villa like ghosts. The man in the lead wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses and had a scholarly air. He was one of Leo's 4 key lieutenants, known only by his code name, Judge. Sir, Judge said, kneeling on one knee, his voice utterly devoid of emotion. Leo glanced at the thugs scattered across the floor and gave a curt nod. Judge immediately rose, gave a silent hand signal, and his team began to efficiently and silently sanitize the scene. Wiping bloodstains, removing the bodies, repairing the broken lock. Within minutes, the room was pristine, as if the brutal fight had never happened. Did you trace it? Leo asked, walking to the window and gazing into the deep night. Hired guns from the black market, paid for by Julian Chase, Judge reported, handing Leo a tablet displaying the freshly traced financial flows. But when we followed the money, we found faint traces of the Phantom Syndicate. The Phantom Syndicate. Leo's pupils contracted. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. 3 years ago, it was that very organization that had murdered his best friend. His entire life since marrying into the Rhodes family, enduring the humiliation, had been for this one lead. Just then, his personal phone rang. The screen lit up with the caller ID. Wifey. Leo took a deep breath. The soul-freezing, killing intent vanished in an instant, replaced by a pitch-perfect portrayal of weakness and panic. He cleared his throat and answered, his voice trembling convincingly. Stella. On the other end, Stella's voice was tired but still cool. Leo? What's wrong? I just got out of a meeting. Stella, I'm so scared. Leo's acting was Oscar-worthy. There was a huge clap of thunder just now. The windows were rattling, and I'm here all alone. I'm terrified. There were 2 seconds of silence on the other end, followed by a soft, irrepressible laugh, laced with exasperated affection. You silly goose. That wasn't thunder. It's a clear night in New York. Leo feigned a moment of confusion before doubling down, shamelessly. I don't care. It was a really loud noise, even scarier than thunder. When are you coming home? Okay, don't be scared. I'll be home as soon as I wrap one last thing up. Stella's voice was now soft enough to melt steel. Be a good boy and wait for me. After hanging up, the panicked expression on Leo's face vanished, replaced by his usual cold indifference. Judge stood nearby, his eyes fixed on the floor, long accustomed to his boss's seamless transformations. That dog Julian has more bite than I expected, Leo said, toying with his phone, his gaze dark and deep. But since he so kindly stuck his neck out, it would be rude not to fit him with a leash. He looked at Judge. Compile a full report on all of Julian's recent business dealings and any possible connection to the Phantom Syndicate. I want on my desk by dawn. Yes, sir. Judge took his leave, disappearing as silently as he had arrived. Half an hour later, Stella walked through the door. The sight that greeted her was Leo, curled up in a corner of the sofa, clutching a throw pillow like a frightened child. Her heart softened. She kicked off her heels, hurried over, and pulled him into a tight hug. It's okay, I'm back. You're safe now. She patted his back gently, as if soothing a startled kitten. Leo burrowed his head into the crook of her neck, inhaling her faint, familiar scent, feeling a warmth and softness that was his alone. His voice was muffled. Stella, if you hadn't come back, I think I would have died of fright. Stella's heart melted at his complete reliance on her. She let out a sigh of relief and continued to comfort him, completely unaware that the man she held so tightly in her arms was smiling, and his smile was as cold as ice. Julian Chase, the Phantom Syndicate. The lights of the top-floor office of Rhodes Corp burned brightly, but the atmosphere inside was glacial. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows lay the glittering New York skyline, but Stella Rhodes was in no mood to appreciate it. Spread across her desk were files for Project Polaris, an overseas venture she had spent years building, which had now been gutted from the inside out. Julian Chase, in league with a mysterious overseas investment firm, had struck like a viper, sinking his fangs into the project's most critical artery. The entire plan had ground to a halt. The company's stock had plummeted in response, and panic was spreading among the shareholders. Ms. Rhodes, our contact in Europe, Mr. Klein, has refused all our attempts to communicate, her assistant reported, her voice laced with defeat. Stella rubbed her throbbing temples and waved a hand, dismissing her. Alone in the vast office, she leaned back in her chair, feeling a profound sense of failure for the first time. This wasn't just business competition. Her opponent's tactics were vicious and cruel, every move calculated to bring Rhodes Corp to its knees. It was late when she returned to the mansion. A single warm lamp was lit in the living room. On the dining table, a few meticulously prepared dishes were still steaming. Leo emerged from the kitchen, wearing an apron, and placed a bowl of soup in front of her. Have some soup first. You must be exhausted. Stella had no appetite, but looking at the gentle profile of her husband, she picked up the spoon. I was watching the business news today. They were talking about that guy in Europe, Klein. Said he's an expert on China, Leo said, feigning casualness as he wiped down the counter. The report also mentioned he's obsessed with ancient art, especially some painting called The Last Pilgrim. The spoon in Stella's hand froze. Of course she knew. To secure this project, she had researched every last detail of Mr. Klein's life. He was indeed obsessed with The Last Pilgrim, a long-lost Renaissance masterpiece. He'd even publicly stated he'd trade half his fortune for it. The problem was, the painting had vanished centuries ago. There wasn't even a decent replica to be found. It was a dead end. She put down her spoon, her voice weary. Forget the original. You can't even find a print of it. Really? Leo dried his hands and sat down across from her, scratching his head with a sheepish look. That's a shame. I was walking through that big flea market in Brooklyn the other day, and I think I saw something that looked just like it on one of the tables. The painting was pretty good, too. Stella looked up at him, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. A flea market? A stall? It sounded like a ridiculous fantasy. But then she looked at Leo's guileless, innocent face and decided she was overthinking it. This man's greatest talent, besides cooking and keeping her bed warm, was probably just dumb luck. Maybe. We could check it out tomorrow. Leo asked tentatively. Even if it's a fake, we could hang it on the wall. Or you could use it to smash over Julian's head. Might make you feel better. His last sentence coaxed a small smile out of her, slightly loosening the knot of tension that had been tightening in her chest all night. On a whim, she nodded. Fine. It was a Hail Mary, but at this point, what did she have to lose? The next day, for the first time in years, Stella swapped her designer suit for casual clothes and followed Leo into the chaotic, dusty maze of the Brooklyn flea market. The air, thick with the smell of old wood and earth, and the cacophony of vendors hawking their wares, made Stella, who was used to the most exclusive venues, deeply uncomfortable. Leo, however, was in his element. He expertly navigated the crowds, leading her to a secluded corner and pointing at a stall cluttered with junk. Honey, look, is that it? The stall owner, a wiry old man, squinted at the impeccably dressed Stella, a glint in his eye. He produced the painting. Well now, you two have good eye. This here is a family heirloom. One price, $200,000. Stella almost laughed out loud. The scroll was so tattered it was falling apart. And he wanted 200 grand? She was about to turn and walk away when Leo grabbed her arm. He turned to the vendor, his face a mask of misery. Sir, do I look like a guy who has $200,000? My wife keeps me on a tight leash. My wallet is emptier than my social calendar. I've only got $500 of pocket money I managed to hide from her, just to buy her a little something to make her happy. Please, do me a favor, help a guy out. He delivered the lines with Emmy-worthy pathos, the perfect picture of a henpecked, pitiable husband. The vendor chuckled, and seeing that Stella, though frowning, hadn't actually left, he waved a dismissive hand. All right, my lucky day. 500, take it, just get out of here. After paying, holding the tattered, worthless-looking scroll, Stella looked at Leo with an expression of profound complexity. Back at the office, she held no real hope, but out of habit, she had her assistant send the painting to a renowned art authenticator she trusted. Half an hour later, her private line rang frantically. The voice on the other end, belonging to the usually calm and collected master authenticator, was trembling, almost hysterical. Ms. Rhodes, the painting. Where's the painting? My God, it's real. It's the genuine article. It's the lost masterpiece, The Last Pilgrim. It's real. A bomb went off in Stella's head. She hung up the phone, frozen in place. Her gaze shot through the glass walls of her office, landing on the man sitting on her sofa, yawning out of boredom. With $500 at a flea market, he had bought the legendary masterpiece capable of salvaging a billion-dollar project. Stella's heart hammered against her ribs. A chill, mixed with an awe so profound it was terrifying, shot up her spine. For the first time, she realized she might have never truly understood the man who had shared her bed for 3 years. To celebrate the project's miraculous recovery, Stella brought Leo to a high-profile charity auction, the most exclusive event of the season in the city. The hall was a sea of couture gowns and custom tuxedos. Stella, in a black fishtail dress, was an elegant, untouchable queen of the night. At her side, Leo, in an ill-fitting rental suit, looked painfully out of place. Well, if it isn't Ms. Rhodes. What a rare sight, a grating voice it cut in. Julian Chase approached, a wine glass in hand. A faint scar on his temple, a souvenir from her party, gave his handsome face a menacing edge. He didn't even look at Leo, his eyes glued to Stella. Stella, are you really parading this stray around in public? Aren't you afraid he'll tarnish the place? Stella's eyes turned to ice. She was about to speak when Leo gently tugged her hand. He took a half-step back, bowing his head in a perfect imitation of a man who knew he'd done something wrong, a useless accessory who didn't belong. The display of weakness seemed to soothe Julian's anger. He grunted with contemptuous satisfaction and walked away. Stella glanced at Leo's profile. In his downcast eyes, she saw no humiliation, only a deep, unsettling calm. A strange feeling stirred in her heart, and she said nothing more. The auction reached its climax. The final item was brought to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, our final piece is a specially encrypted hard drive. According to the donor, it contains the core trade secrets of a major multinational corporation. The auctioneer's words sent a ripple of murmurs through the crowd. Leo's eyes narrowed slightly. Here it is. 50 million. Julian was the first to raise his paddle, his expression one of absolute certainty. He wanted the drive, but more than that, he wanted to crush Stella financially in front of everyone. A man sitting in a dark corner, seemingly insignificant, also raised his paddle. 60 million. Leo recognized him. A known money launderer for the Phantom Syndicate. The price climbed steadily, quickly surpassing 200 million. Stella frowned. This was far beyond the drive's commercial value. She touched Leo's arm, signaling him to let it go. Just as Julian shouted, 300 million, and shot them a provocative glare, Leo, who had been silent the entire time, slowly raised his own paddle. 500 million. His two quiet words detonated in the hall like a bomb. The room fell silent. Every eye was fixed on a man in the cheap suit. Julian's face turned a shade of purple. He stared at Leo, his voice a strangled cry. Where the hell are you going to get that kind of money? Leo didn't even look at him. He simply nodded at the auctioneer. 500 million. Do I hear any higher? Going once. Going twice. 600 million. Julian practically screamed, the veins in his neck bulging. Leo raised his paddle again, his expression as serene as a calm lake. 1 billion. Julian choked, sputtering, and nearly collapsed. $1 billion? For a damn hard drive? The man was insane. The auctioneer's gavel fell with a decisive crack. Sold. Amidst the shocked, probing, and utterly bewildered stares of the entire room, Leo calmly lowered his paddle. When he went to the back room to finalize the transaction, Stella followed him in, closing the door behind them. She wasn't angry. She just watched him, her gaze so sharp it felt like it could dissect him. Where did you get the money? Leo turned around. The imperious aura he had briefly worn vanished, replaced by a playful, almost goofy grin. He sidled up to Stella, cautiously pinching the hem of her dress between two fingers. I put on your secondary card, darling. He blinked, his tone a mix of ingratiating charm and innocence. You're not mad, are you? Stella looked at him, at the glint of cunning and amusement he couldn't quite hide in his eyes. She knew perfectly well that no credit card in the world had $1 billion limit. He wasn't even trying to give a real explanation. The cloud of mystery around him grew thicker. How many secrets was this man hiding? But strangely, she didn't feel deceived. Instead, she felt a thrill, an excitement, and a sense of security she had never known. Stella suddenly reached out, not to strike him, but to gently straighten his crooked tie. Her fingertips brushed deliberately against the column of his throat. Her voice was a whisper. We'll settle this at home. The Rolls-Royce glided smoothly along the winding road back to their mansion. The atmosphere inside the car was strange. Leo toyed with the priceless hard drive, leaning back against the leather seat with a lazy air. "Darling, aren't you afraid I'll take your credit card and make a run for it?" he teased. Stella ignored his joke. She was turned sideways, studying him with an intensity Leo had never seen before. Her gaze wasn't cold or distant. It was filled with a deep, consuming curiosity and an excitement she herself didn't fully understand. This man was like a treasure chest with a false bottom. Just when you thought you'd seen everything, he revealed another, deeper layer. Suddenly, the screech of tires tore through the night. Crash! A violent impact threw them against their seats. A heavy-duty truck had T-boned the security car in front of them, completely blocking the road. Instantly, several black SUVs materialized from the darkness, boxing them in. The doors flew open, and a dozen men in black, their faces grim and professional, poured out. They moved in unison, armed with blades, their objective clear: the hard drive. "Phantom Syndicate," Leo's voice dropped, turning cold as stone. His eyes, hidden behind his glasses, were pools of murderous intent. His fingers were already tensed, ready to shatter the window and spring into action. His people, his woman, he wouldn't even let a harsh word touch her, let alone this scum. But just as he was about to move, a cool hand pressed firmly on his shoulder. "Stay in the car. Protect the drive." Stella's voice was low but held the unshakable weight of a command. Leo froze, turned to look at her. In her face, every trace of the polished CEO had vanished. In its place was the stark, predatory focus of a hunter. With a sharp click, she kicked off her six-figure custom heels without a second thought, her bare feet landing on the soft floor mat. She then leaned down and pulled a strangely shaped short blade from a hidden compartment beneath her seat. The blade was long and narrow, a dark, burnished gold that seemed to drink the faint light in the car. Leo's pupils constricted violently. He had never imagined that his seemingly untouchable Ice Queen wife was, in fact, a sleeping lioness. The car door opened, and Stella launched herself out like a black blur, charging head-on into the pack of assassins. Her movements were brutally efficient, fast, precise, lethal. There were no flashy moves, just pure, deadly economy. Every strike was aimed at a vital point. She sidestepped a downward slash, her wrist flicking, and the blade drew a silent, red line across an attacker's throat. Using his falling body as a shield, she lunged forward, thrusting the blade up and under the ribs of another, straight into his heart. Blood splattered across her expensive evening gown. She was a dark flower blooming in the night, a beautiful, deadly spectacle. Leo sat in the car, watching silently. He didn't move because he realized Stella didn't need his help. Well, maybe just a little. He saw an assassin approaching Stella from her blind spot. Leo's finger tapped the window control. As the glass silently lowered, he flicked his wrist. A single coin shot through the air with a soft whistle, striking the assassin's knife-wielding hand with pinpoint accuracy. Clang! The man cried out in pain as his blade fell to the ground. That fraction of a second was all Stella needed to spin and deliver a fatal cut. Separated by a battlefield of life and death, they moved with an eerie, unspoken synergy. One in the light, a queen harvesting lives. One in the shadows, a king controlling the board. A few minutes later, it was over. Stella stood amidst the carnage, spattered with blood that wasn't hers, the tip of her golden blade still dripping. She turned slowly, through the shattered car window, her gaze, sharp and piercing, locked onto Leo. She walked toward the car, her tall figure silhouetted by the headlights, exuding a suffocating pressure. She didn't get in. She stood just outside the door, her eyes seeming to see through life and death itself, and asked, her voice low and steady, "Leo, who the hell are you?" Leo was silent. He looked at the woman before him, her dress stained with dirt and blood, her hair in disarray, yet more dazzling than ever. The fierce, unapologetic way she had thrown herself between him and danger was a sledgehammer that shattered the final wall around his heart. The masquerade was over. He slowly raised a hand, his thumb gently wiping a smear of blood from her cheek. The gesture was so tender it was jarring against the backdrop of carnage. "Hades," he said. The name was quiet, but it landed in Stella's ears with the force of a thunderclap. Stella's pupils contracted slightly. Leo's gaze was as deep as the night. He didn't look away. 3 years ago, my best friend was killed by the Phantom Syndicate. All the evidence pointed to an overseas channel that had dealings with the Rhodes family. Marrying into your family was a gambit for my revenge. He paused, looking directly into her eyes, his tone colored with a complexity he hadn't realized was there. A plan for everything. How to gain your trust, how to investigate the leads, how to make a clean exit. The only thing I didn't plan for was you. He didn't say the cheesy, romantic words, but that single phrase, "I didn't plan for you," was more real than any vow. The little moments over the past 3 years, the antacid she'd silently leave for him, the birthday dinner she prepared while pretending to be annoyed, the countless times she had defended him. They were all unforeseen variables, the only light in his cold, calculated world. The shock and anger he expected never appeared on Stella's face. Instead, she let out a long, slow breath, as if releasing a weight she had carried for 3 years. Her tense shoulders relaxed. A faint smile, a mixture of bitterness and relief, touched her lips. So that's how it was. Her reaction was so unexpected. It was Leo's turn to be stunned. Stella slid her short blade back into its hidden compartment under the seat, her movements fluid and practiced. She turned back to him, her expression calm, and dropped a bombshell of her own. The Rhodes family aren't just business people. Or at least, not entirely. We are a family of guardians, a lineage that has existed for centuries. And the Phantom Syndicate, they are our sworn enemy. Leo's heart skipped a beat. Stella's fingertip gently tapped his chest, a foxy, cunning light in her eyes, like a predator who had just watched her prey walk right into her trap. "So, you think you chose me?" She let out a soft laugh. 3 years ago, I needed a powerful ally to secure my position, and a husband in name only to fend off nuisances like Julian Chase. And as luck would have it, my intelligence network flagged a man known as Hades, who was seeking revenge against the syndicate and planning to use a very dangerous, very direct method, a strategic marriage, to get close to the Rhodes family. Leo's expression was completely frozen. He, Hades, the Phantom King of the underworld, master of a plan he thought was flawless, had been under surveillance from the very beginning. Stella watched his rare, dumbfounded expression with a surge of satisfaction, her tone becoming playful. "So, you see, our marriage was never an accident. It was my premeditated design." She leaned closer, her breath warm against his skin. "I was just waiting for you to finally tell me the truth." Leo was silent for a long moment, then he started to laugh. A low chuckle that grew into a full-bodied laugh, his chest vibrating with the sound. He was laughing at himself, the master strategist who had walked right into someone else's cage. He pulled this woman, this infuriating, brilliant, incredible woman, into his arms, holding her tight. He rested his chin on the top of her head, his voice a mix of gritted teeth, adoration. "Well played, Ms. Rhodes. Well played." In his arms, Stella couldn't help but laugh too. She hugged him back, pressing her cheek against his solid chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. "The same to you, Mr. Hades." She paused, then tilted her head up to look at him, her eyes sparkling. "So, now can you answer a question for me?" "What?" "The night I smashed that bottle over Julian's head. Was I cool or what?" Leo looked at her, at that face practically begging for praise, and all his deep-seated plans and cold calculations melted into a helpless, fond smile. "Cool," he said, leaning down to press a soft kiss to her forehead. "My queen, the coolest in the world." In that moment, every barrier and secret between them evaporated. In their place was true, unshakable trust, and the promise of a war they would wage side by side. Stella leaned against him and whispered, "The Phantom Syndicate's director for Asia goes by the codename The Doctor. He's a ghost. I've been hunting him for years and have never even gotten close." Leo's eyes turned cold. He tightened his arm around his wife, his voice steady and resolute. "That's because he hasn't met us yet." Leo learned of Julian Chase's fate from a secure communication with Judge. Treated like garbage and disposed of by the Phantom Syndicate. He's not dead, but he might as well be. Last seen in a black market clinic in some third-world country, being kept alive by four drip. Judge's tone was flat, as if he were discussing the weather. Leo grunted in acknowledgement and ended the call. He didn't ask for more details. He had no interest. A clown like Julian wasn't worth another thought. He and Stella had a much bigger target now. The Phantom Syndicate's director for Asia, the mysterious figure known as the Doctor. The basement of the Rhodes mansion had been transformed into a command center that would rival any military operation. A massive electronic screen displayed a dizzying web of data streams and network diagrams. Judge, the core of Leo's operation, and the Rhodes family's white-haired, old-world butler stood side by side in front of the screen, efficiently exchanging intelligence. An odd but effective synergy filled the air. Stella walked in with 2 cups of coffee, handing one to Leo, her fingertips brushing against his. Let's be clear on the division of labor, she said, her eyes on the screen. Her tone was cool, but a smile played in her eyes. I'll be at the card table, winning all their chips. You'll be in the back, chopping off the hands of anyone who tries to flip the table. It was a blunt, brutal assessment, but it was perfectly fitting. Leo took a sip of the coffee, the warmth spreading through him. Works for me, he nodded. Though chopping off hands is messy work. I prefer to play mind games. As he spoke, Judge pulled a new file onto the main screen. Sir, we fully decrypted the hard drive from the auction. We found someone interesting. He pointed to a profile. The syndicate's chief financial officer. Codename, the accountant. He's a coward, he's greedy, and we have fatal leverage on him. Stella raised an eyebrow. Oh, what kind of leverage? Leo chuckled, answering for Judge. He has 3 secret accounts in a Swiss bank. Accounts that not even the syndicate knows about. Now, what do you think would happen if the doctor found out his money man had been skimming off the top? Stella understood immediately, a cold smile gracing her lips. The defection was almost laughably easy. When Leo, using his identity as Hades, sent the accountant the transaction records from those 3 accounts, the man on the other end was silent for 3 seconds before completely breaking down. A net began to close around the doctor. A week later, in international waters, a lavish business gala was underway on a luxury yacht named the Poseidon. The host was none other than the president of Rhodes Corp., Stella Rhodes. Dressed in a stunning burgundy gown, she moved gracefully among the titans of industry, her smile brilliant, looking every bit the part of a CEO expanding her empire. No one knew about the grain-sized earpiece hidden in her ear. 2 tangos, 3 o'clock, 1 at the elevator. Their pros, Leo's voice murmured, low and casual. Stella, holding a glass of champagne, elegantly turned to toast a business partner in that direction, her peripheral vision taking in everything. Copy that. Your accountant looks a little nervous. He's about to shred that handkerchief of his. Can you blame him? First time betraying his boss. He's new at this. Leo's voice held a hint of a smile. I'm in the central control room. The security in here is like papier-mâché. Stella sipped her champagne, her voice dropping to a whisper. Don't get cocky. Even a submarine can hit a reef. Don't worry. My ship is a submarine. Just then, the accountant shuffled nervously toward his target, a man with gold-rimmed glasses and a scholarly demeanor, one of the doctor's most trusted lieutenants. They exchanged a few quiet words. A briefcase was opened, revealing the core item of their transaction. Now, Stella commanded softly. At the exact same moment, with a sharp click, every light in the grand ballroom went out. Gasps and screams erupted from the guests. In the total darkness, the only sound was the silent footfalls of a phantom. Less than 30 seconds later, the emergency lights flickered on, bathing the room in a dim glow. The scene that greeted the guests made them gasp. The 2 men who had just been making a deal, along with a dozen of their bodyguards, were all lying silently on the floor, either dead or unconscious. The crucial briefcase was gone. Standing among the crowd, Stella wore a perfectly calibrated expression of shock, but inside, she was as calm as a frozen sea. A dark figure dropped silently from the shadows of an air vent, landing behind her without a sound. Done, Leo whispered in her ear. Stella didn't turn. In a voice barely audible, she asked, You have it. The accountant's intel was good. It's the complete architectural plans and security codes for the doctor's next secret base. Leo pressed a tiny flash drive in her palm. It felt cool to the touch. He paused, his voice taking on a new gravity. Stella, this was just the appetizer. The real hunt is just beginning. Alarms blared, tearing through the silence of the underground base. Red lights flashed maniacally across metal walls, painting every face in a demonic glow. Welcome, Hades, and the little star of the Rhodes family. A single face appeared on every screen, a man with gold-rimmed glasses and a gentle smile, seated in a leather chair with his fingers interlaced. It was the Phantom Syndicate's director for Asia, the doctor. Behind him, tied to a chair, was the high-level informant they had turned. His face was ashen with despair. The doctor chuckled, pushing his glasses up his nose. A brilliant plan. Unfortunately, the chess piece he used to pass messages was my piece from the very beginning. A red countdown timer appeared on the screen. 1,500 hours. In 15 minutes, this place will be your shared tomb. The doctor's voice remained calm. Oh, and by the way, the bomb's primary detonator is in the power room on level B7. This gentleman, however, is in the main control room on the top floor. You can choose one, or you could split up. He watched them like an amused spectator enjoying his prey's final, desperate struggle. Leo and Stella locked eyes. There was no hesitation. I'll get the hostage. Stella's voice was devoid of any emotion. I'll disarm the bomb. Leo's was just as concise. Be careful, Stella said, her usually icy expression softening for a fraction of a second. If you die, there will be no one left to run up my credit card bill. Leo's lips twitched into a smile. Don't worry, I haven't maxed it out yet. I'm not ready to die. Before the words had even faded, they shot off in opposite directions like two arrows from a bow. Stella's figure was a blur in the intersecting corridors. Any guard who tried to stop her became another body at the feet of the blade she'd brought from the car. Her movements were brutally efficient, precise, and lethal. On the top floor, the doctor casually watched Stella's rampage on the security monitors. Go, he said to the man beside him. Play with Ms. Rhodes. Don't let her interrupt me too early. When Stella kicked down the door to the control room, the doctor was slowly wiping his scalpel with an antiseptic cloth. Ms. Rhodes, you're even more impressive than your file suggests, he said, his eyes scanning her as if she were a perfect work of art. A pity you're about to be damaged. Stella wasted no time on words, her blade slashing for his throat. The doctor didn't retreat. He advanced, his scalpel drawing a strange arc that expertly parried her attack. The tip of his blade left a deep, bloody gash on her arm. He was a master of human anatomy, every attack aimed at a nerve cluster or a vulnerable joint. Stella gritted her teeth, the searing pain only making her more focused. She abandoned any thought of a quick victory and settled in for a battle of attrition. Meanwhile, in the power room on level B7, Leo faced a timer far more complex than he'd anticipated. A web of wires crisscrossed a central panel where an ECG monitor was linked directly to the doctor's vital signs. If he died, the bomb would detonate instantly. Judge, give me all of the doctor's biometric data. I need it in 3 minutes, Leo commanded through his earpiece, his fingers already flying as he dismantled the outer casing. Time ticked by. In the control room, Stella was covered in wounds. Her stamina was draining rapidly, while the doctor fought like a tireless, precise machine. Give up, he said, kicking her hard in the stomach and sending her to the floor. He pressed the scalpel to her neck. Your man is probably a pile of ash by now. Stella coughed up blood, but her eyes were brighter than ever, holding a spark of mockery. Is that so? I have a feeling he's already here. The doctor froze. In that instant, a wave of killing intent so cold it could freeze hell washed over him from behind. Leo had appeared as if from nowhere, a ghost returned from the abyss. He had disarmed the bomb, but not without a price. His left shoulder was a mess of mangled flesh and blood. He saw Stella lying in a pool of her own blood, and his eyes, usually so calm, now burned with an incinerating rage. You hurt my Stella. There were no more words, only the most primal, pure violence. The doctor's celebrated techniques were a joke against Leo's hurricane of attacks. Leo abandoned all defense, trading injury for injury, life for life. The doctor's arm was broken. His chest was pierced. As he fell, the last thing he saw was the image of Leo carefully lifting Stella, wrapping her wounds with a piece of his own shirt. The base began to shake violently. The ceiling crumbled. Leo lifted the unconscious Stella into his arms, and, against a backdrop of rising flames and thunderous explosions, he walked toward the exit. He leaned close to her ear and, with all the strength he had left, whispered, Stella, I'm taking you home. The Phantom Syndicate's entire Asian division collapsed overnight. The news sent shockwaves through the underworld. No one knew who did it, only that the cancer that had been growing for years had been surgically removed by an unstoppable force. Leo had avenged his friend, and Stella had secured her family's centuries-old legacy. 3 months later, at a private recovery clinic south of the city, Stella was propped up in bed, looking out the window. Leo sat beside her, clumsily peeling an apple. The peel broke 7 or 8 times, and by the time he was done, the apple was a lumpy, misshapen mess half its original size. All right, stop. Any more peeling, and it'll be just a core, Stella laughed. Leo handed her the sad-looking apple with a serious expression. A technical issue. I'll improve next time. Stella took a bite. It was sweet. She looked at the faint scar on Leo's wrist, a permanent reminder of the blow he had taken for her. Her heart clenched. She leaned over and gently kissed the mark. Leo's body went still for a second before he turned his hand and captured hers, lacing their fingers together. On the day she was discharged, Rhodes Corp's stock hit an all-time high. It had completely absorbed the vast assets left behind by the syndicate's collapse, becoming a true global behemoth. In the underworld, a new name began to circulate, Hades. It replaced the Phantom Syndicate, establishing a new order. None of this mattered much to them. They listened to the reports from their assistants in the car and then promptly forgot about it. Absolute power was nothing compared to an ordinary life. On a warm, sunny afternoon, they walked hand in hand through Central Park, just like any other couple. Leo wore a simple white t-shirt and Stella a casual sundress. The Ice Queen had melted, and her eyes were filled with a soft, gentle light. "Look, an ice cream truck. Can we get one?" Stella pointed, her voice full of childish delight. Leo was about to nod when a group of young punks with brightly colored hair swaggered over, blocking their path. The one in the lead, with garish yellow hair, let his eyes roam disrespectfully over Stella. He then jerked his chin at Leo. "Hey, buddy, you're one lucky guy. How about you let us borrow your girl for a couple of days?" Another, with green hair, chimed in. "Look at you, all scrawny. No way you can satisfy a woman that hot." The temperatures seemed to drop. The smile on Leo's face hadn't faded, but his eyes had changed. It was the calm, placid look of a man observing the dead. He was just about to raise his head and crack his knuckles. But Stella moved first. She let go of Leo's hand, took a step forward, and moved so fast she was a blur. There was a sharp crack of bone dislocating, followed by a scream that could curdle milk. The yellow-haired punk was on the ground, face down in the grass, after a clean, brutal shoulder throw. He twitched, unable to get up. The other punk's legs turned to jelly. They stared at the woman who had, a moment ago, looked so gentle and sweet, as if they were seeing a ghost. Stella brushed off her hands, though they were perfectly clean. She turned and looped her arm back through Leo's. She looked up at him, her smile brilliant and proud, the frost in her eyes melting into a warm spring. "Darling, wasn't I amazing?" Leo looked down at her, the ice in his own eyes long since replaced by pure, unadulterated adoration. He reached out and gently tapped the tip of her nose. "You were," he said, "my queen, the most amazing in the world." He paused, leaning close to her ear, his voice a low murmur only she could hear. "Let's have a baby." Stella's face flushed a deep crimson, the blush spreading all the way to her ears. For the first time, she looked genuinely shy. She gave him a light tap on the chest, but buried her face deeper into his arm. The sunlight was perfect, the breeze was gentle. What followed was a story all its own.